Okay, so to start out, do you want to just tell me a little bit more about your background, where you grew up, what your life was like as a kid?
Yeah. All right. So my name is Tarra Simmons, Representative Tarra Simmons. I represent the 23rd Legislative District in Washington State, Kitsap County. And I today I'm an attorney and I'm also a nonprofit director and serving in the legislature. And I grew up, my parents suffered with substance use disorder. They divorced when I was a year old. I grew up between the two of them. My mom was in Washington, my father in California. So I went back and forth. I have an adverse childhood experience score of 10, which is the highest that a person can have. That means I've gone through a lot of violence and poverty and trauma as a child. And that's a score that kind of dictates or predicts future health and social outcomes for kids. And so growing up in poverty and violence really impacted my life in ways I'm still learning how to regulate my nervous system and not react to, scary situations. Um, but I was probably 11 the first time I was arrested. And that's because my father was selling our food stamps to buy crack cocaine. He was addicted to crack cocaine. And I was in Stockton, California on the streets, not doing well. And I was in and out of the system my whole life until I was 36. And that was about 11 years ago. Yeah. And so, yeah, I released from prison May 20th of 2020 or 2013 for the last time. So I realized, growing up and I had my first son, I was 14 years old when I got pregnant. I hadn't lived with a parent ever again since I was 13. And I was trafficked when I was on the streets and homeless. And it was really hard. And so when I got pregnant at 14, I went to the hospital because I was extremely sick. And that was when I was connected with some social services. And I was found out, because I was pregnant, I could get TANF, which is, welfare and food stamps and healthcare. And I got enough that on my 15th birthday, I actually signed my first lease for a studio apartment. It had cockroaches and it was horrible, but it was much better than living on the streets. And I finally had a door that I could shut and have some safety. So I had my son at 15 and I brought him home, and Child Protection Services was really concerned about him. And so they had certain things I had to do in order to keep him, including go back to school. So I went back to school and I went to the alternative school at night and the regular high school during the day. And I did all 4 years of high school in 1 year. And I graduated at 16 because I was just very committed to giving him a better life than what I had. And that was always has been and always will be my North Star, is to give my children a better life than what I had. And I'm very happy that my kids have much less adverse childhood experiences than I did. But so I was the first person in my entire family to ever graduate from high school. My father actually got his GED in the California Youth Authority. My mom never got a GED. So out of everyone in my family, I was the first person to graduate. And it happened to be that a neighbor told me about financial aid and Pell Grants, and that if I went to community college, I would get some money back and I could actually buy my son some shoes out of that. And that's what motivated me to go to community college. Never, nobody in my family had gone to college, but a neighbor told me about this opportunity. And so he helped me get hooked up with an advisor, and I went down there and got enrolled, and I completed my associate's degree, and then I transferred and got a bachelor's degree in nursing. And by the time I was 21, I was a registered nurse and I owned my own home. And I thought that I had escaped everything from my past. And but that wasn't true, because I still had a lot of childhood trauma and didn't really understand how that was impacting my life. But I really would get into bad relationships. I didn't have boundaries. I didn't have a lot of self-worth. And I would end up with, abusive men who were also committing crime and using, drugs and alcohol. And being around that, I was too. And now I know that I was, masking my post-traumatic stress disorder with substances, and developed a substance use disorder. So, but I was still kind of functioning in some ways off and on. I'd get a little bit of um, time and maybe a more stable relationship, and I would be able to hold down employment and everything. But uh, over time, I think, my addiction definitely progressed, and I ended up getting more additional charges for selling drugs to support my habit. And also had a couple of assault charges. Well, one from when I was a kid and one from as an adult, and also theft from stealing from Walmart. Um, and so in and out of, juvenile detention, jail, and prison for most of my life. And finally, when I went to prison, it was the first time that I had ever heard or met anybody that was in recovery, and went to 12-step anonymous meetings. And they came into the prison, the volunteers did, and exposed me to that. My parents never got into recovery. My father ended up not using hard drugs anymore towards the end of his life, but he was still, prescribed opiates and taking pain pills. But he did spend the last, 5, 7 years of his life without using illegal drugs, which was nice. He still passed away very young, I think 52 years old,
Oh, wow.
from
Sorry.
complications of many years of IV drug use. And so, but when I met these people that were in recovery, and they talked about their childhood trauma as well, and then I felt like I wasn't so alone, and that there were other people who had really traumatic childhoods, and it wasn't their fault. And I got to start to break free from shame that I was carrying, and thinking, somehow it was all my fault and I was bad or something like that. So I started to heal through, volunteer programs that came into the prison. Um, and so when I got out of prison, I definitely, wanted to keep moving forward, and I did not ever want to use drugs again. And I wanted to, be able to provide for my kids. But now I have this, serious criminal history, and nobody was going to hire me. I was working at Burger King, actually. And I was grateful for that job, though, because it was better than, scrubbing toilets in prison for 42 cents an hour. But the courts were garnishing my paycheck to pay my court fines and fees that were not restitution to a victim. They were just costs associated with my prosecution and the policing, so $2,000 to the law enforcement meth fund, and $200 to file the court case, and $1,000 for my public defender, and all of these things. And they were accruing 12% interest the whole time I was in prison. And I thought, how am I gonna? I couldn't pay for housing, even if I found a landlord to rent to me. It was going to be really hard to pay for housing, because I was getting my minimum wage paycheck garnished to pay these costs. And so the more I went around and in my recovery meetings, and talked to other people that were, a decade into their recovery and couldn't get a job or a place to live, I just thought, wow, this is so unfair. And, what scared me is that I was thinking about, how am I going to make money in order to survive? And I started to think, well, maybe I could just, sell drugs and not use them. And even just the thought of that scared me, because I knew that, my thoughts would become my actions. Basically, there's this saying about, watch what you think, because, it can become your actions. And so the fact that I was even thinking about that scared me, because I never wanted to be away from my kids again, like I had been when I was in prison. And so I remembered these law students that came to my prison when I was incarcerated, who were helping me with my child custody issue. And they had told me that I should think about going to law school and becoming a lawyer, because I was helping the other women at the prison with their legal issues as they were helping me. And I said, could I be a lawyer with a criminal record, though? I didn't think I could. And they introduced me to a gentleman named Sean Hopwood and his book called The Lawman. And he was somebody who served 12 years in federal prison for 5 armed bank robberies. And he was a second year law student at the University of Washington near my home. And I read his book and I contacted him, I think on LinkedIn or something. And he allowed me to go visit him at the University of Washington, and encouraged me to go to law school. And he was certain he was going to get through the bar exam and the character and fitness and become a lawyer. And he had made so many great connections, because while he was in prison, he became, I think, one of America's best jailhouse lawyers, and even got the United States Supreme Court to accept one of his petitions on behalf of his cellmate. And so he had a great legal mind, and he was confident that he would be able to become a lawyer. And so I thought, wow, well, I need to get a new career. I've already used my Pell Grant. I can't go back to school. And I've got a nursing degree, which is hard when you can't be a registered nurse because of your background. Although I was able to keep my nursing license through all of this, because I volunteered to go through a program, which was treatment with monitoring, for 5 years. And so I was able to keep my nursing license, but there's a lot of regulations that even if somebody wants to hire me, they couldn't, because of my criminal history. And so I didn't know what I was going to do, how I was going to get out of poverty again, where my skill set, and how I would get a job with this criminal history and kind of a useless degree and a useless license. And so I was convinced by a lot of people to go to law school. And several, law students that I met while I was in prison helped me, advised me. I got into a law school admission test class, and took the LSAT. And, Sean was one of the people who edited my personal statement when I applied for law school. And I was accepted about a year and 4 months after I got out of prison. I was sitting in a law school class, and it was terrifying. I did not know any lawyers, and I did not think I was smart enough, and I didn't think, I would do well, because my other degree was in nursing and like a lot of science and math and things. And law is much different. It's more about writing and reading, um, and so, but lo and behold, I did really well during my law school time. I founded a nonprofit organization that was about organizing formerly incarcerated people to share our stories with lawmakers and decision makers to hopefully influence change and reform the system. I also interned at 5 different public legal service agencies, doing a variety of individual representation and policy work. The governor had appointed me to 2, statewide boards, commissions, and I also, graduated magna cum laude with the Graduating Student Award and the Dean's Medal. And throughout that whole time, I was sharing my story around the state. I was testifying in Olympia, in the state capitol, to help change laws regarding court fines and fees and employment barriers for people with criminal history, and general, prison reform. And so when I graduated law school, I was represented by my law school professor, who took my case pro bono. And represented me in front of the character and fitness hearing. And, I had over 100 letters of support from people who I had worked with over the last 3 years who knew me, and even people who had known me my whole life and could speak to my character and who I am at my core, and that my trauma and substance use disorder were, the reasons why I committed crime. And I was treating those, and had 5 years of random drug testing to keep my nursing license so I could show them, and all these things. And they still recommended that I not be able to sit for the bar exam. 6-3 was the decision, and it was extremely painful because one of the things I had also gotten was a SCADN fellowship, which, law students that go into public service know what that is. It's a very prestigious fellowship where they pay your salary for 2 years so you can do the work you want to do to serve low income people. And mine was, I just wanted to have a legal clinic here in my little town of Bremerton, Washington, in Kitsap County, and help people coming out of prison to meet all of their different legal needs. Because, it's not just employment, housing, and fines and fees, but it's also reunifying with your children, getting your driver's license back, figuring out, how to take care of maybe the debt that was on your credit when you went to prison. And, you might have to go bankrupt, or figure out how to deal with the collections and clean up your credit. And there's so many things that a lawyer can help people with when they're coming out of prison, and they really need it. So that's what I wanted to do. But the Bar Association volunteer attorneys that sit on the character and fitness board felt that I was too proud of that accomplishment, that I had gotten a SCADN fellowship, which, I was the first person. It's been around for 35 years now, and they give out about 30 a year. And it usually goes to, people that graduate from Harvard or Yale. It's very prestigious, very competitive. And I was the first person ever from my school, first person from my state, and also the first formerly incarcerated person to ever, get this very prestigious fellowship. And so, yeah, I was proud, especially considering where I came from. But they, said I was too proud of my accomplishments, and I felt entitled to be a lawyer. And so the majority, 6-3, recommended that I not be able to take the bar exam and get licensed to become a lawyer. And that sparked, the SCADN firm, and my friend Sean Hopwood, who at that time was now a Georgetown law professor, just 2 years after he graduated, a tenure track Georgetown law professor. After he clerked at the DC Circuit, he decided that he would join my case and appeal that decision to the Washington Supreme Court, which had never really been done, and there was no rules on how to do it, but we knew it was a right. So anyway, I had a great legal team coordinating on my case, and he appealed to the Supreme Court. And as soon as he filed the brief, like within a few hours, the ACLU of Washington filed an amicus brief that was signed on by, I think, 54 organizations across the nation, and several prominent attorneys, and so many people really supported me across the nation. And so the court got that, and they thought, well, we better take this up on appeal and have a hearing. And that's the first time in history that we have had an open hearing on a bar admission case. And so I had to wait about 7 months, and November of 2017 that was an amazing day for me. We had this, hearing, and the justices were extremely upset. You can tell from watching the hearing. I've watched it probably 100 times now. Because when we left that day, it's supposed to take 5 or 6 months to get an opinion from the court, but by the end of the day, they ruled unanimously in my favor, and allowed me to sit for the bar exam and become a lawyer. So for me, it was the most healing form of justice that I've ever gotten from a system. Usually I'm used to being treated really poorly from systems throughout my life, and that they didn't understand me, they didn't hear me, they didn't see my heart, they only saw my behavior, and I was a bad person. And which kept, feeding into that cycle of I'm not good enough. And that's what I was, believed, because I was abused so much as a child also. And then that, led into me as an adult woman, making poor decisions in relationships and not knowing my self-worth, and not having boundaries. And so, they really gave me a lot of healing through that, and I will never forget it. And so I was able to take the bar exam, and passed on the first time, and became a lawyer in 2018. But during that time, the case was covered internationally. I had people reaching out to me from Australia and Finland and like all these different places, through social media. But also, locally in my state, people were watching the case and paying close attention, and a lot of elected officials were as well, and they were cheering for me. And so, on the day of my hearing in the Temple of Justice, my representative was actually there, sitting in the courtroom. It was overfilled. They had to set up overflow. It was really amazing to see that level of support for me, and for the issue. I think people really cared. They cared about me, but they also cared about the issue, about second chances and redemption, and allowing humans to be human and make mistakes and come back and live up and give their gifts and talents, to our communities. And so, my state representative was there, and shortly after that, she, told me that, she was 77 and that she needed to retire, but she would not retire unless I agreed to run for office and be her successor. And I think, she did that not only for my, advocacy to become an attorney, but also just the advocacy I was doing in Olympia. She had gotten to know me, through that work. And so I really did not want to do that. I Full disclosure, wasn't always a voter. I mean, my family was worried about how we're going to kill the cockroaches in the house, or how we're going to get milk to put in the macaroni and cheese. It's not like we had a lot of capacity to think about things outside, bigger. And so I wasn't always a voter. I wasn't politically active. I had never been a member of a political party. And I didn't know the first thing about running for office. And I thought, no, there's no way I want to do that, because, I do see a lot of negativity in politics, and that they will use your past against you, and, throw mud in the media. And I just didn't want to go through that. But after several people asking me over many times, I started to think, well, you know what? If I don't do this, I don't know when there'll be another formerly incarcerated person who will have kind of all of the protections that I've had. Number one, I have already shared my story in a very public way to become a lawyer. And I had to do that to fight to the Supreme Court. And that was covered internationally. And so, I guess my fear around them using my past against me was that I've already shared it. And they can't kind of use something against me that I own and that I have taken responsibility for, and I am making a daily amends through my work of helping others, not commit crime, or clear their records so they can get jobs and provide for their families. And so I guess I got less afraid of people using my past against me. And then I had a lot of people promise to teach me all I needed to know about politics and running a campaign, and all of that. And so I finally agreed to do it, probably in 2018. And so I got to plan, because I was running for a 2020 election. And my having my predecessor pave the way for me meant a lot too, because she was able to then take me and introduce me to everybody, and things like that. And so I announced my campaign in 2019, and I was elected in 2020 as the first formerly incarcerated person in Washington. And we think nationally, I have not met anybody yet, and I've been trying to connect with people across the nation. And now we have 6 of us, and we are connected, and we are supporting each other. And we are trying to help other people with our lived experiences run also. And really, I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican because each state is different. And I just want people with our lived experience there so they can educate our colleagues about the real challenges and how it's not helping public safety. To keep people out of the job market and to keep people in being exploited for a place to live and just all the ways that we are set up to be exploited even further because of our criminal records and have more abuse and more trauma and not be able to provide for our children. And I think for me the goal is really to break down that generational trauma. And so I'm really happy that my kids have less adverse childhood experiences than I do. And I just became a grandmother for the first time. I'm very happy. I have two boys, and they're 21 and 31 now. So Davon is 31 and Dominic is 21. And it was actually Dominic that gave me my grandchild. And Dominic has a better career than my 31-year-old, actually. So he went to the Marines right after he graduated. He's a Marine reservist, and he's a security guard in the shipyard here in the federal, works for the federal government. And he is on his way to become a law enforcement officer, a police officer, which is ironic. But he really thinks that's a way he can give back and help people. And both of my kids are African American, and so he really understands the issues around race and policing, and I think he's a good person to be a bridge builder. And so he's going to do that. But he gave me a grandson, Nicholas, and Nicholas was born premature. And I've been really proud of seeing my son step into becoming a father and learning how to navigate, taking time off work and being at the hospital for 3 months with his partner and being a father. So I just know that Nicholas is going to have less adverse childhood experiences than Dominic did even. And so that's kind of my goal in life. And it's what I would like to give to everybody else that I know who's been incarcerated or been convicted of crimes and has these stigmatizing records that prevent us from volunteering in our kids' schools or being the executor of your dying parents' estate, or just all of the ways these records cause harm for many years. And by that virtue also leads to more generational trauma for the people we are trying to care for in our lives. And so as a lawmaker, I've been able to do a lot of amazing things. But even prior to getting elected, my seatmate, Senator Drew Hansen, he was the representative at the time. Now he's a senator. He passed a bill called the New Hope Act. And it was a bill where a part of it I wrote. I was a lawyer, and it kind of just expanded the types of offenses that people can vacate here in Washington state. And it also changed the timelines because it used to be, you have to wait 10 years to vacate a Class B felony if it was an eligible offense type. But that time didn't start until after you paid off your legal financial obligations, which can take so long because, like I said, they had 12% interest. And, they were giving us thousands of dollars of costs and fees when we were convicted of crimes. And so before I was elected, Senator Hansen passed the New Hope Act, which is the reason why I was able to vacate my record last year. Finally, I have no felonies, no misdemeanors, nothing on my record now. I'm really excited about that. It feels like I finally have freedom. For the first time in my life. So I can't be, discriminated against based on anything anymore. So we passed that bill in 2019, was a big deal. And then I got elected in 2020. And since I've been elected, I've been able to pass, so many bills that really help my community and, my general community here where I live. my neighbors who need affordable healthcare or childcare access or affordable housing and all of these other things that I'm able to work on, but also my community of people who have been impacted by the justice system. And so those court fines and fees that were such a barrier because they were garnishing my Burger King paycheck, and because your time didn't start until you could vacate your record until you paid those off. Well, we don't have those anymore in Washington state. If you are indigent, if you're poor, um, the only thing that you are given now, if you are convicted of a crime, is restitution to a victim, which I believe is just. I think that we should make victims whole. If we harm somebody and steal their laptop, we should replace that laptop. But charging poor people, or trying to charge poor people to fund our court system, was always a bad idea, because we found out that we were spending dollars to chase dimes. Really, it was ineffective. So whether you care about, fiscal responsibility and the bureaucracy of clerks and collection agencies trying to, squeeze this like blood out of a turnip, or you care about humanity and don't want people suffering with that stress and anxiety over their head, and also the real impacts to their families, it was really good. And it took 3 bills to finally get to this point. But I am very happy that we no longer have that. We don't charge people to take their DNA anymore. And we don't, and we fund victim services now from the state general fund instead of trying to get it from other people. And so that helps. Victim agencies also have a more stable source of revenue. And it helps poor people who are trying to get their lives back together. I also was able to make sure that people, when they're released from incarceration, prison in Washington, they have 6 months of a housing voucher. So they're not being released homeless anymore. That was it's been a really bad model to release people homeless with $40, because I truly believe that's making more crime. And none of us are safe when people are released from prison after serving a long time and don't have any job skills and no place to go. And people are going to do what they have to do to survive. If you're hungry, you're going to, probably rob somebody or steal or whatever. And so now people will have, they have a lot more reentry support, because I, am there and I'm able to educate my colleagues. And now people get $300 in gate money. They're also, connected to healthcare and, given 6 months of housing voucher and connected to other social services like, the food benefits and things like that. And, we're working more on trying to get more job training in prisons and higher education. We had a recent shift in the federal system where we took the ban off of Pell Grants, so people can get Pell Grants while they're in prison. And, hopefully, more community colleges are starting to offer classes and in the prisons here. So that's good. I've also, been able to make sure that people can vote as soon as they leave prison. It is really sad to me because it is such a partisan issue, and I don't understand why, because, formerly incarcerated people are not a monolith. I have many colleagues or friends that are formerly incarcerated that vote differently than I do. And to me, it is not a public safety risk to allow people to vote. It only is maybe an incentive to be pro-social by thinking about something bigger than yourself, and being part of the community. And so I was really happy when I passed that bill, that people can vote as soon as they are released, even if they're at home on electronic monitoring or in a work release or even in jail. People are not convicted yet there. I would really like to get rid of the ban on voting altogether based on criminal history, because I think, there are several states where you can vote in prison, also several countries. And I went to Norway last summer, and and went and saw their prisons and the way they do it. And it's so much better and different and more effective. And they have such less recidivism rate, which means communities are safer, people are healthier. But they vote, and it's actually weird if you wouldn't vote. And they vote while they're in prison because they encourage pro-social behavior and learning about civics and learning about our government and things like that. And so I would really like to um, not have that right taken away at all. I think it is just kind of an ideological thing, not really rooted in public safety. Um, let's see, what else have I been able to accomplish? Just a lot of funding into reentry services that was never there before, including reentry legal aid, and behavioral health, peer support, housing, job training when they come home, and other kinds of supports to make sure that people are having a better shot at an effective reentry. So I absolutely love what I get to do now, both with people who have had similar lived experiences to me, but also just generally here in my community. And the whole goal really is to give kids a first chance at life so they don't need a second chance later. And I love that my middle school this year, eighth grade graduation, they made a new award. It's called the Tarra Future Leader Award. And I got to give it to one student who has been struggling with homelessness and her parents being addicted. And, it's just giving, like I said, all kids need a first chance, and sometimes their parents aren't able to do that. And so building up more social safety nets to make sure that they have the support they need and don't go down the wrong path. That's really the reason why I ran for office too. But I am glad that I got to break that concrete ceiling, and that it's becoming more normal. It's becoming more normal for people like me to become lawyers. When I first went to law school, I only knew about like 4 formerly incarcerated lawyers. Now there's hundreds across the nation that I'm in connection with, and I'd like to see more people with our lived experience, get into different levels of government so we can help our colleagues and educate them about effective ways to keep our community safe and allow people to live up to their greatest potential. What other questions do you have?
It's amazing. I'm just sitting here so inspired by all of the incredible things that you've done throughout your life, throughout your career. Just thank you for all you are and who you stand for. It's really incredible.
Thank you.
And as I'm sitting here, I do have a couple of questions just hearing you. And
Mhm.
one is, I'm really excited because one of our former clients just started law school this year. And I
Amazing.
got a call from him a few weeks ago,
Mhm.
just I think he was really nervous. He's just like, I don't know any lawyers. I don't know if I'm going to fit in. And I think my question for you would be, what advice would you have for someone who has overcome a lot, is trying to move forward from their past, really on their own merit, right? Achieving all of these different things, but still feel outside of their comfort zone and maybe like they don't belong. What would you
Yeah.
say?
Yeah. I mean, belonging is, the human experience is to want to belong somewhere. I have found belonging with people who have similar lived experiences of mine. I will tell you, I feel safer with people who have gone through some healing work and therapy, and have been able to make sense of that. And what I find in my community is almost all of us have PTSD, whether that was from childhood or while you're incarcerated. If you didn't have it before you went to prison, you definitely have it after the experience. And sometimes, we react on each other and don't know how to manage our PTSD. And so, but I think belonging, I think most people seek belonging, whether you have a criminal history or not. That's just the human experience. And so sometimes we find belonging in people that we share values or share experiences with past experiences, share future goals or beliefs. We find belonging in different ways. And so finding people, that you can trust, when I was in law school, for example, I was the only formerly incarcerated person that I know of there. And I didn't feel like I belonged a lot at the campus. I went out into the world and did these great internships with people who had the same vision as I did or the same mission. And that's where I found belonging. And then I would come back to the law school. I didn't, participate in a lot of the like traditional legal things like journal or moot court. I was just on a different path. But I did find a group of students who wanted to be public defenders, or a group of students who wanted to be social justice lawyers, and those became my people. And so I felt some belonging there. Um, I think, we have to find our people wherever that is. And fortunately, there's a lot of different types of communities that we can connect in. For a while, for me, it was, my faith network or my recovery network, or I found belonging in different places, and it changes throughout life too, because I change and my goals or my mission or the strategy I want to use or changes. And so I do struggle in the legislature to find belonging, but I do have some allies, and I think that's probably not unique. I think most legislators probably struggle to find belonging because our work is just really kind of toxic, and politics is not fun. It's about power, and we're trying to build power, and we're trying to get things done by building power, or it's not always a great place to be, for especially for people with trauma history. But I have to find that strength with my community every day to keep going, because I know that I'm bringing a missing voice to those conversations. And I've just been able to see, the culture change so much since I've been there. And so that's why I'm really committed to making sure that every state house has a formerly incarcerated person in it, who can really help change that culture. And like I said, these should not be partisan issues. We all want a healthier community, a safer community. I think some people would like to, just incarcerate and keep people incarcerated, but we can't do that. That's like human rights violations. People are coming home, and so we better prepare them for when they come home, so they're not committing more crime. And that's how we will have safer communities. So yeah, but belonging is, it's a lifelong journey, and it changes. But just find your people, find people that share your values, maybe share your lived experiences, or maybe share one of your multiple identities or hobbies, or, and build those relationships so you have that for protection when challenging times come, because challenging times come a lot in law and politics. I sometimes wish I had gone to social work school and became a therapist and lived in trauma informed land all day. So yeah.
Yeah, and to that, you have been through an incredible amount. I mean, you've overcome so much, but with all of these milestones, even despite those milestones, you've encountered these barriers, and, talking about being admitted to the bar, like, other than people and finding your people, what has helped give you kind of the perseverance and the courage to get through some of those really, really hard experiences?
Yeah. It's funny. My therapist is like, always wonders, where I got my resilience, because if we could bottle it up and give it to others, it would be so nice. I think I had a grandmother who, really loved me when I was a child, and taught me some things. But honestly, what has helped me get the perseverance to move on is learning to love myself. And forgive myself, and um, kind of like get like process some of the trauma that I've been through, and um, do a lot of self-reflection of, because I'm a human, I'm not perfect. None of us are perfect. But when we do that self-reflection and we find an area of our character or a habit that maybe doesn't make us feel so good about ourselves, then we can work on it and we can change it. And so through a lot of self-reflection, I've been able to really morph into, a woman that I can be proud of. And that's what's most important in life, because people won't always be there for me, but I will always be there with me. So I better like me. And I have to, keep working on that. And it has been the most liberating um, thing that I've ever done. And it's probably actually my proudest accomplishment. People say, oh, well, you should be so proud you became a lawyer and you fought the Supreme Court, or you got elected as the first and only, or all these things. But really, my proudest accomplishments are the changes that I have personally gone through for me, and then also raising two amazing sons who have never been involved in the justice system, who don't have criminal records, who are kind and nurturing young men. Um, so, yeah.
Well, that's definitely something to be proud of, breaking those cycles and
Mhm.
just building a new life for the people that you love. I just
Mhm.
love that. I'm curious about you going through the process to have your records vacated. A lot of people sometimes ask me, oh, well, if you're public about your story, if you're sharing your story, why even go through the record clearance process? And I'm curious if you can talk about, because you have been so public about your story, why was that so important to you? What motivated you to do that? And then what did it feel like at the end?
Oh, yeah. I mean, gosh. So September 8th of 23, I had my record vacated, and it will go down in one of the top 5 days of my life, because I mean, for the first time, I really felt liberation and freedom, because yeah, even though I'm open about my story and would always share about my criminal history, and chose careers, or recently like chose paths where I knew I would be able to participate. There were a lot of things that even people who wanted to hire me or wanted to give me a chance couldn't, because of my criminal history. So I remember, like, when I was in law school, a prosecutor wanted to hire me to be part of his team that did, diversions. So I could see it from both sides. So I could see it from the defense side and the prosecutor side, because he really, really believed in this, these diversions for drug offenses, and had been doing it, before it was popular, you know. And he couldn't hire me because there was, federal regulations about people with criminal history having access to, or even in the same room as the federal database, right? Background check stuff. And so he couldn't hire me. I definitely wanted to volunteer my kids' schools, and I couldn't. I literally couldn't be the executor of, family members' estate, or I couldn't travel places. Some countries discriminate based on criminal history and don't allow people, or there's extra barriers you have to go through in order to get admittance into certain countries. And yeah, lots of different jobs. So now I could go back and be a nurse if I wanted, which is like amazing. I loved being a nurse. I loved caring for people on that one-on-one level. And now one day, if I want to get out of law and politics and go be a nurse, I mean, some days I'm really tempted, because when you leave your shift, work is over. There's no emails. There's no like constant work, um, and, you can have a more balanced life and some joy. So, it's really important, because I don't want to face any discrimination. And, there are people that might know my story, but might not agree with it. They might not agree with second chances. They might agree, think that people that commit crimes should just, go away and live underground forever. And now they can't discriminate against me based on that. And so it was very important for me It was very healing. I mean, also, my son, like I said, is a Marine. He's um, a federal security guard. He has to have a firearm for that. I needed to get my rights restored so that way I'm not around any firearms and then guilty of a new crime just by being around them, because people with felonies are not supposed to be in the same room with firearms or anything. And so, I needed to do that. And now that I have been able to restore all of my rights, I just feel a lot more like maybe one day I will feel like I belong in regular society.
Yeah. I love that. And so many barriers that people don't necessarily think of. And I think that's the other thing I've seen people with records is like, you don't know when it's going to be a barrier and you may think it's gone. And it seems like at every turn, there's something that kind of it pops up again. And it's
Mhm.
just really horrible the way that you just continue to be punished long, long after you change your life. And it's very unfair. So thank you for sharing that. Just looking at my questions, I feel like you checked them all off through just talking about your experience. What does the future hold for you? What are you excited about? And that could be career-wise, it could be new legislation that you're thinking of running. Just when you think about the future, what do you get excited about?
Yeah. I guess, the things I do get most excited about my future have to do with my, continuing to heal, like personally, because I've given so much of my life to just surviving and then working so hard to just get where I'm at that, I'm kind of behind in some other areas, and that, I'm excited to travel. I love to travel now. That's one of the things. And then, in my career, I am actually, um, not interested in running for higher office. I I think I'm learning that I prefer to be more of a support to other leaders. And now I do love my current position and I don't plan on leaving that. But I like supporting other people as well. And, through my position, though, I get to make a lot of change. And so right now I am, working a lot on restorative justice and sentencing reform, that also helps victims heal, and holding both together, because I think historically, and I am also part of the problem, and we've tried to build power over, victim voices and prosecutors in order to get sentencing reform. And now my approach is to work with victims and say, you know, what we did historically is wrong, and we've given 60-year sentences in Washington state. We don't have parole, and so if you're given 60 years at 20, you're doing that, and it just doesn't make sense to keep people in there after a certain period of time, because they've healed from their childhood trauma. They're no longer a risk to public safety. They're committed to a new way of life, and we're spending a whole bunch of money to keep people incarcerated, and they're not set up to be nursing homes. And so then there's all these lawsuits, and all of these things. But understanding that are looking at a sentence again and potentially lowering that and allowing someone to get out who has caused serious harm, and maybe even a death to a family member, that can be really hard for victims to have to go through that again. And so, while we can't continue that injustice, we need to support victims through this. And so I sat down with them and talked about, like, what is it that you need? And, like, a legal advocate to go to any court hearings with them, a therapist if they're having, symptoms of their own trauma again. And it is unfair. And so can we make sure that they have financial stability, and um, what is it that they need, job training or education, or things to make sure that they also have, like, a purpose maybe for their pain, which could be starting a nonprofit that supports victims, in crisis or whatever it is, or, you know, if you lost a son, maybe you want to work on gun violence prevention because, you know, your son was gang affected or whatever, or, you know, how can we help you make purpose for your pain as well? So I find that my work is the purpose why I went through everything I've gone through in my life. I've heard these couple things like you can't have a testimony without a test, or you can't have a message without a mess. And so, you know, purpose for the pain, whatever, but I do believe in that. And that's what helps me stay positive and happy and looking forward. And so, you know, I'm really excited to work on sentencing reform. Um, I also, you know, really want to work more on prison reform and just making conditions be more human centered, you know, more trauma informed, places where people can actually heal. It's very hard to heal in an environment where you're still being traumatized or oppressed. And so we think about, like, you know, strip searches of women who've been, you know, sexually abused and trafficked for so many years, and then they have to do these strip searches all the time. And you know, they're done kind of in a dehumanizing way a lot of times. And how can we, you know, use body scanners instead? And when a strip search does have to happen, make sure it's done humanely. You know, just different types in offering, you know, education and job training. And in Norway, they the correctional officers that work in the prisons, they think that they are mentors to the incarcerated individuals. And so they sit down and eat together and play chess together. And it's much different. And the incarcerated individual looks up to their officer as their mentor, and they build a trusting relationship. And so there's less violence in prisons because people feel accountable to each other because there's a relationship. So I'm really excited to work more on prison reform. And then, you know, just expanding the ways people can get rid of records, and the offense types that can one day be removed, removing the barriers based on criminal history more generally, even if you can't vacate your record, or you can't do it yet, or because it's hard to get to the place where you can vacate. It takes a person with a lot of perseverance and a lot of grit, and to live through those years of kind of, you know, being othered and being stigmatized and not having opportunity. And so we lose people, right? They go back and reoffend during that time because they don't have other options sometimes. And so how can we make sure everybody can be successful, to keep our community safe? And yeah, that's, so I'm looking forward to lots more legislation in my current role, but I'm looking forward to also getting my book published. I have been working on a book for a long time, and it's, you know, almost done. And I have been trying to, you know, find a publisher. And if not, I'm probably just going to self-publish. But I definitely want to get my story out there and into the hands of the people who need it. And that can be, you know, young girls, young women, and, you know, people who've been incarcerated. But I think in my story, everyone can find some peace, because everyone has felt like they don't belong at some point, and we have to overcome that. So
I didn't know you were writing a book. What's your book going to be called? Do you know yet?
well, right now it's called Just Representation. So I mean, I feel like it can stand for several things, like, you know, my legislative career, I'm a representative, but also as an attorney, I represent people, but also just being a representative of formerly incarcerated people. And so, and just is, you know, justice, like, yeah. So
It's a great title. That's a really great project. Would love, I know we're almost out of time, which is crazy, but would love for you to tell me a little bit more about the Freedom Ball. I know at the beginning you were talking
Yes.
about it, but would love for you to just share a little bit more background about
Yeah.
what it is, why you're doing it, and
Mhm.
why it needs to happen.
Yeah. So, last year when I got my record vacated, I was fortunate because I know, the prosecutor and, judges and everybody in my county. And so and then, my Senator Hansen, my seatmate who passed the New Hope Act, happens to be a lawyer. And so we decided to make this, special because it was a very special thing for me. And it, it removed every fear I had about, being able to care for myself or, ever having to get into, an abusive relationship again out of financial need or, being exploited, not having the opportunity to just be judged based on my own merit and my own skills and everything. And so this whole criminal record, vacation expungement, they call it in some states, was a huge deal for me. And so my seatmate, was my lawyer, and he took my case pro bono and he put it through his firm, and I signed a release and all that stuff, and he filed the motion, um, and the prosecutor agreed to the motion. And we went before a judge who had been a friend and mentor to me since 2015, since the beginning of law school, and was even one of the people. I could only have 3 people testify, and he was one of the people that testified at my character and fitness hearing. And he was sitting next to me at the Temple of Justice on the day of my Supreme Court hearing. And he had always sworn me into everything, sworn me into the bar, sworn me into, getting elected, all, taking my oath, for elected office, all these things. So he presided, and we had, the whole room was filled at the courthouse on my, vacating day. And then we had Zoom also. And so people were Zooming in from around the country up there too. Um, and then afterwards, we went to the community center and we had a big celebration. We had food and, some speakers and, photo booth and just a good time. And I had made this playlist and we never got to use the playlist because, the technology wasn't working. And so someone said, you should, use that later, have a dance or something. I was like, oh yeah. So yeah, next year we're going to do this every year. And it's not going to be about me. It's going to be about everyone else who got freedom in the last year. And I want to do this every single year. And so this is how the idea came together. And so every September now I want to have a freedom ball. And, this year is the first, and it's coming up here in a couple of days. And I'm very excited about it because I kind of went all out this time. And, we are having, a catered dinner. We're having, a dance and a DJ and a photographer and a videographer and all this, but we're also having all the formerly incarcerated electeds from around the country come into town to help me honor the people who have received freedom in the last year. And while they're here, we're going to go on prison tours. So it is, really important for me to always show my gratitude for the blessings that I've been given or the opportunities that I've been given, um, not just through words, but through actions and through, um, giving those same opportunities to others. Because, I look back in my life and there were so many times where I felt hopeless and desperate and that I was never going to be able to overcome. And now I have overcome a lot. And there were people there for me all the way. And now I feel like it's my responsibility to make sure other people have that hope and those opportunities as well. And so I know that a lot of us never got to go to a school dance because we didn't have a first chance. We were in the school to prison pipeline. We didn't go to prom. And so this is an opportunity for us to get dressed up in our prom dresses, or whatever, and, celebrate freedom and, and keep sharing that hope. And every year I want to honor new people.
I love that. How many people are planning to come? Do you know?
We are sold out. We had 200 tickets. We're sold out. We have people on the waiting list.
So
So
amazing.
yeah.
That's such an incredible idea. Have you heard of anything like that around the country?
No, I mean, I have seen like some sneaker balls within our community, but not necessarily like honoring the people who've gotten their record expunged in last year or anything like that. So no, I have not seen anything like that.
That's so incredible. I can't wait to hear all about it and see your photos, and I just love that.